Hello, my name is Pedro and today I will show you how to make this image. We're going to start in Magicavoxel, then we're going to move to Maya, but you can use other 3D softwares because they all work the same, so you can translate these to other softwares. We're going to animate in Mixamo, which is totally automatic, and from then we're going to bring it back to Maya to make the final render, and then I will show you how to edit that render in Photoshop to make it look amazing. So it's going to be super simple if you follow along. So let's get started. Let's start by pressing delete just to remove that first box of work, and we're going to press Ctrl N, and this will basically create an empty workspace for us. So if we click this button up here on the top right, or also if we press Tab with this box selected, we're going to enter the work zone, and now we can start creating our model. So the first thing we will do is the head of Steve. So I will change the size of my box up here in the top right to 8 by 8 by 8. And now we have this place to work. To move the camera, just press middle mouse button to drag it around, right mouse button to rotate it like that, and you can zoom in and out with the wheel. You can also press number 5 to focus on the object you have selected, in this case this empty workspace. I'm going to start creating the head. So to manage the colors, I will press here where it says number 3 to use the gray palette. I just like to use this palette instead of the other one with all the colors, just to create my own colors. So to get the colors right, what I would recommend is for you to have a reference. In this case, I will use this image of Steve. I use this image because it's a simplified version, you see, with less colors. It will look nicer on our final render. So what you do is with Magicavoxel not maximize, and this screen on next to it, you will just click on your color here, Alt left click, and without letting go of left click, you will drag until you stop on top of one of the colors, and notice how the blue ring around the color is. So when you let go, you will pick up that color. So I will pick up one for the shirt, one for the trousers that are the same color as the eyes. Then in the next line, I will just pick up the skin color, and I will also get the hair. And here as well on top, I will just pick up the shoes. And I do it this way so we have all the clothing and the colors of the skin and the hair, the natural colors of his body. So now that we have all the colors that we need, I will just get rid of this window and let's go back in here. So let's select our skin color, and with this face mode selected, you click on attach, and you can click and drag up just to fill this whole space with the skin color. I really like to work in orthographic mode to avoid the deformation of the camera that is very annoying to me. So I will just click orthographic, and this way we don't have deformation. Great. So let's start painting the features of this character. So the first thing we have is we're gonna press the mirror mode. So you see, like if I draw now, if I go to box mode, paint, I can paint this color. I will undo that if I press in here or just Ctrl Z. I will instead use my mirror mode, and this way you see everything I do, it duplicates on the other side, and that makes it easier to work. So let's start with the beard. So we have to count 2 voxels in, and in the third one we paint a line, and then we will go 1 up. Okay, then we're gonna paint the eyes. So we're gonna count from the beard 1 up, right? So the nose is here, and then the eyes are here. And I know that looks weird, but follow along and you will see. So we go 1 up, and here's the eye. And then I forgot to pick up a white color, so I will just create it here by hand. And these are Steve's eyes. Great, so let's paint the hair now. So if we go 1 up here, we can paint 1, 2, 3, and then that's the front part of the hair. Great. So then we continue to paint here. Just gonna go like that. So one down here, then it's another one this way, another one down, another one this way, another one down, and it goes back. Then you can use your face tool to paint all of these. And back here, you cannot just paint again like that because it fills everything. So you need to go back to your box tool, paint a line, and then with face tool, paint and paint. And then we have Steve's hair painted. Yep. So now if you wanted another color just for the nose, you can Ctrl Shift left click and drag, and just now we create a duplicate of this color. So if we select this other one, we can just make it a bit more saturated and just paint with the box tool just a nose. And that concludes the head of the model. So I will click this arrow to go out, and I will just move it up for the moment. Next, we're going to create a torso. So let's Ctrl N. This will create a new box, and let's press this arrow to go in and start working on it. But the first thing we want is to create the right space for it. So just because I counted how many voxels you need beforehand, I know that this is 4, 8, 4, and 10. This will create the perfect size for your torso. So if we go closer now, we can start painting this. So basically just use the fill tool and attach voxels. So click and drag. And as you can see, I clicked on the wrong color. It should have been this one. So we can just paint it. So just click on the paint with the right color selected, click and drag to paint it. So we also need to open up space here for the skin color. So let's go back to our paint and let's count 1, 2, and on the third one, just paint, then go one down and paint there. That's it. So next, we're gonna just go back and use this moving tool to just select on the blue arrow and start dragging up until it's right where it should be. So that's how it should look. And now let's move on to create the next part of the body, which will be the legs. So let's create a new box, Ctrl N. Let's go in to work inside of it, and let's change the size to 4, 4, 7. This way we create the first part of the leg. And let's use the trousers color to just use the face tool and attach to create one part of the trouser. So that's as simple as that. Now just move it up and make sure to put it right where it should be. So now I will Ctrl C and Ctrl V to duplicate this. And it seems like nothing happened, but if now I drag, you see that it created a duplicate, but it was just on top of the other one. So let's place that right there. And let's add a little detail here that this model usually has, which is 2 voxels of this color. Let's go box, paint, and remove the mirroring for a moment, just to create this detail of the shirt that he has. Perfect. So next, let's create the rest of the legs. So I will just use the same piece here. I will Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and duplicate down because it's the same size. And for the shoes, we want to use this gray color, and let's go underneath and let's use the face, paint, and just click and drag one up. Okay. And then with the box tool, we want to count 1, 2, and on the third one, just paint a line like that. Then continue it and do the same on the other side. I had to do it that way because I didn't have my mirror mode activated. I will reactivate that now. So we can now Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and push this away. Now we have the whole body, which is missing the arms. So let's create them. So let's make a new box, Control N, and let's change the size so it is 6. I'm going in. Let's press 6, 4, 4, and this will be the size of the arm. So let's go press number 5 to go closer to that, and now let's start creating the arm. Let's create it with the color of the shirt first, and then let's change to the color of our skin. And with the paint mode on the face, we can remove the mirroring for now and paint 1, 2, 3. Okay, so half of it is shirt and half of it is skin. So I will now move this. You see I have these 3 colors here, so these colors select 2 of the arrows at the same time. So this green one will select the blue and the red arrow at once, so I can move in 2 axes at the same time. And I will place this right there on the shoulder. So next step, I will Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and push this forward. And then I would just change it. So I will go in, and with my face tool, paint, I will just click and drag to paint all of this in skin color. And just like that, we have our arm working. So now I will select one, click, and then holding Shift, I will click on the other one. I have both of them selected. Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and I will move it away. But the problem now is that it's rotated wrong. So I will just go to the rotation 90 degrees option here. You can only see that when you are outside and selecting those things. And now I will just click and Y, and that way it just placed correctly. So it's that simple to create this model. I think there's also another detail here that you can add in the back. You can just click on one of the legs and paint with the box mode 1, 1, 1 like that, and do the same on the other side. And this way we have our model completed. If you wanted to add more detail, something you could do is just start duplicating colors. For instance, I can Ctrl Shift, left click, and drag this color over here and make it a bit darker, and maybe just outline the end of the trousers if you wanted, like so. If the other parts of the model are bothering you, you can just click this thing here, and when you turn it off, it just hides everything else, and you complete it. And once you go out, you continue to see everything else. So you can do that on the rest of your model. This is just a detail. If you wanted to add more details, you could do it this way. And if you wanted, you could do the same for the shirt. So let's Ctrl Shift and drag this color and make it darker. And let's just paint this detail for the shirt. Okay, I will let you play with this until you're happy, but basically we have our Steve model complete. The reason for me to make it cut like this is just because here is where I want this arm to bend. So this line here will be where the arm bends. The same for the legs and the head. And that's why we separate everything into different pieces. So the last step will be to select everything and press G. This will drop your model just to make sure that it's touching the ground plane. And I also want to make sure that it's centered on the scene. So I will just move the camera up and press this button to center, or also I can press number 5. And if you go a bit further, you see how this line perfectly match the center of the scene. These thicker black lines are the center. So if your model was like that, just make sure to match the green one and also match the red one. And that way your model is perfectly centered. Let's first start by sorting out a bit the colors that we have here. So if you press Ctrl and left click, you can move colors around. So I'll just group the colors that are the same together. So let's put it that way. So light and dark, and then the shoes. Then we have the skin tones. We have, I think this color is not being used for anything, so I'll just place this here. And then I will just create some nodes. So if you click on this arrow here, you can just say Steve
cloth, Steve, let's call it skin, although you also have the hair and the eyes. And now let's create a zombie. So let's make zombie skin. Okay. So this is just for our reference. It doesn't change anything other than just helping us navigate our scene. So let's hide that for now. And let's start creating the zombie. So what I will do is I will select everything here and I will move it to another layer. So you see I select everything and there's this little gray arrow showing us in which layer are the objects that we have selected. So now I will just click next to this little circle in number 15. And now all of Steve is in number 15. It's in this layer. I can turn it on and off. And you see how the lines turn gray, just like this layer is gray. And I can also right click and rename this Steve. Let's save our scene. So let's go to the folder that we created, and let's create a new folder called Magicavoxel. And in here, let's create Steve. Okay, so we're gonna create all assets in this very same scene, but let's keep going. So the zombie is basically the same model but painted. So let's grab everything, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and now you see I have my other model duplicated. So I will just undo that and I will move it to this layer instead. And let's rename this layer zombie. Now let's turn off this layer of Steve and we are here with our duplicate. So if I turn this on and off, you see nothing remains on the scene. So what I will do is just open a reference for my zombie. I will just Google a random image of a zombie in Minecraft and I will bring it here. So again, just like last time, I will have my image here and I will have Magicavoxel over here. So I will start picking up the colors of this zombie. So I will just grab the general color of the skin. Then I will grab a darker version like the hair over here. And you see that everything else is pretty much the same. So I will just have these two colors and I will work with that. I also need a black color for the eyes. So I'll just pick that one up too. And we are done. We can continue to Magicavoxel and now let's start painting this model. So let's go in, for instance, the arm, and let's paint it with the bucket tool to green. If you want this model to be more dirty, we can select both of these colors, select the geometry we want to affect and just right click, and this button that appears here is randomize. So basically random color assignment. So when you click that, you will basically paint the zombie with these colors. If you wanted to, we could just move these colors away and just have a duplicate of these, Ctrl Shift, let's click and drag, sorry, that's hard to say, and make it a bit lighter. So let's select everything with the one tool, select these two colors, right click, randomize. And then you will have a more randomized version of these zombies, a bit more putrid. So let's do that again for the arm. Let's select the shoulder bit, tab to go in, select the colors you want to affect, right click, randomize. Let's do the same for the other arms. Select, randomize, select, randomize. And let's do the same thing for this little patch of skin here. And for the head, you will want to just remove everything. Just go to your base color with your F and face tool. Basically, you can press F as well to select it and paint. Let's just paint all of that and then click and drag to have a fully green face. And we can then select everything, right click and randomize. And now I will use the black color for the eyes. So you can basically see how it is. It's 3 voxels up and you have the nose. So 1, 2, 3, here's the nose. So let's paint that with this darker color, sorry, box paint. 1, 2, 3. Here's the nose because you remember the beard would be here if it was the other model, so it's in the same spot. but I want this, painted with this, so I will just paint over. And then the eyes are right on top of that, here and here. I could have also used my mirror mode. I'll just activate it now. So then we have the face of our zombie, and that's pretty much it. We have our zombie. So let's hide this layer, and now we will create blocks for the scenario as well. So let's Google Minecraft dirt block. Again, what I will do is just take these colors for my Magicavoxel scene. So let's skip one line and let's start picking up first the grass. Let's go from the lightest to the next one, and then the almost darkest, and then the darkest. And let's do the same for the dirt. Let's go from the lightest, then we have the next one, and then there's a darker one, and then there is the darkest. And it also has like a small gray color there as well. So let's start creating our block. So let's Control N, and this block is 16 square. So just press 16 there, enter, and we can start working. So the first step will be to, with your face tool, attach, click and drag, just so you have your box of dirt. And now I can select everything, select all of our colors, right click, random voxels. And that way you just basically have your dirt color finished. You see, that's done. So I will just move it. Right now it's inside of a hidden layer, so that's why it goes away. So I will just move it to this one and rename this to dirt block. Let's Control C, Control V, put it in this other layer, hide it. Now I'm here working with my duplicate, which will be my grass. So you can basically just come here and start painting with your box tool, paint, and just start adding some grass lines. If you want, you can just try to count the voxels and make sure that you're painting it just like the original one. Otherwise, just do it like this. We're just having some fun here. Don't worry too much about making it perfect. This is just for a still image that we can edit later, and this is just to show you, just to show you how I do it. So don't worry too much. Now I can just select everything here, Control C, Control V, and now I can use the rotate tool. Sorry, not in Y, not in X, it's in Z, just twice, and you see how it moved and pasted there. And now I will just paint everything here, sorry, with my paint, all green. Then I will select it and I will randomize it with these colors. Something I forgot is that we forgot to use these gray colors. Add some of them here and there in each face, just so it's different. I'll do it by hand like that, no mirroring, and boom, boom, and it's done. Now we have our dirt block. So let's rename this dirt. And let's now do the next one. Let's Control V again and put it in number 11 here. We can delete this. And let's do our stone. So let's go Minecraft stone block. And we have our image over here. So let's make Magicavoxel smaller. Let's make this smaller. Yep. And let's start stealing the colors that we're missing. So we already have one. So let's keep getting colors. Let's get the lighter one. Let's get the medium dark and then the darkest. And that's all we need. We can now change these colors up a bit. So let's Control left click to sort them. And you see the colors, they don't look too different. So I will exaggerate that a bit. I will just make this a bit lighter. And this one slightly less. then I will leave this as is and I will make this one darker. Okay, so now I will just fill this box with our face tool, attach, click and drag. And you can, if you want to make it very easy, just select all your colors and randomize, but this is not how this looks in Minecraft. So you can do it that way, but I will show you how to do it the other way, which is more like what it looks in Minecraft. It's basically these lines of colors. So just go line by line, adding some of these colors like so. And maybe just a point sometimes, maybe just a longer line, and then just keep doing that in every line. And this will be much closer to what you see in Minecraft. So just make a bunch of lines, don't worry too much, and just make sure that they are not all in the same spot, and then just move on to the next color and start doing the same. So you see, I'm not really being very careful. I'm just making some lines. We're having fun here, so don't worry too much. I'm making the lines as fast as I can, just to not making it too boring. Let's move to the next color. And like this, just making sure that we have a good variety of lines and colors, and we don't have too much of one color anywhere. Yeah, maybe like that. And just fix it up if you see that it's missing some color here and there. And that's one of the faces. So now what I will do is just select with this tool here, just select here and box select. I will just click and drag, and I will Control C, Control V. And now it's duplicated. I can just rotate it, and with Control hold, you can left click and drag. Then you can, if you want, just rotate it again so it's not the same. Control C, Control V, do it again, Control left click and drag, maybe rotate again, Control C, Control V, once more. And finally, let's Control C, Control V and rotate this time in X, and let's drag it up and drag it down. And we have something like a Minecraft block. So I guess this is good enough. Just this that I don't like, that is rotated on the wrong direction. So I'll just select it and I will rotate it like so, just so all the lines are horizontal. Okay, that's great. So we have our blocks done. So what I will do next is I will just add something that is not really a perfect Minecraft thing, but I will just create a new box and I will move it up. I'm gonna go to a frontal view. We can use this button here just to go to the closest view that is straight. And I will start creating grass blades. So I will turn on this again. And I will make just a bunch of dots with my box attached. And then I will just make some of them taller, like so. Some of them will be shorter, some of them will be taller. And just to have something else to decorate our scene. Okay. Magicavoxel works with cubes and you cannot make like faces like in Minecraft. So sometimes you will have stuff that you cannot translate perfectly to voxels. Okay. So just to add some detail to this, I will just paint the lower level darker, then the next level will be is this one, the next level will be a bit less dark, just to have like a bit of a gradient in them. And maybe I will leave this one full color, and then those that are longer I will just continue to create this gradient, and then I will leave it with this other color. I could even just select all of these colors, Control C, Control V, and move it one up, just to have a bit of a longer grass. So then I will click this button right here to conform the box that I'm working with to the shape of the grass, and then I can turn off my dirt. Now I first need to move this away, turn off, and let's rename this grass, and select it and press G just so it's on the ground. And I will just add here grass, dirt, and stone. Cool. So lastly, I will create the Minecraft sword. So let's hide my grass and let's start working on this. Let's let go of it and let's start working on this layer number 9. And what I will do is Control N and go to a frontal view because the Minecraft sword is just pretty flat. So let's go there. Let's zoom in a bit. So for this moment, I will just use a reference because I'm going to show you how I count the voxels just in case you want to learn how to copy the models basically. So I will look for diamond sword in Google and just bring it. I'm opening the image. I am about to show you. And bring your reference. And we can start counting these voxels now. So basically we can just copy the colors with Alt, left click, drag and let go on top of the color. So we have this color now. So let's start painting. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these diamonds here, of these boxes. So let's paint them. 4, 5, 6, 7. And that way we can start like painting the rest of the colors. So let's move this one up a bit and let's get the lighter color. And we know it has like 3 cubes here. So 1, 2, 3. And then it's 1, 2 underneath each one of these. Right? And the last one doesn't have them. So let's keep it that way. And then let's pick up the dark green here. And we see it has like 3 and 1, 2 like that. And then it's 1 on each one of these sides. Yeah, including the last one. And basically we have the blade done. So now we see that it has like 1, 2, and then 3. So we have this 1, 2, 3, and then it makes this arrow. Same for the other side. 2, 3, and it makes the arrow. I will just click here so you see it a bit better, maybe, hopefully. So then we see that down there it has like 1 and another one like so, and then 1 like that. So 1, 1 like that, here. And in here, just to make it simple, I don't want to have a lot of colors. I will just paint all of these with the lighter color. Like so. If you don't like that, just add another color. Let's just add another color just for the sake of it. Let's pick up these darker green and let's paint all of these on a darker green. But just make sure it's not too similar, right? So maybe make it a bit less of a darker green, but still darker than the other one. And then we have the color of the wood. So let's pick up the lightest and let's paint attach 1, 2, 3. And then we have a dark wood. So let's pick that up and let's paint 1, 2 on the sides. And then it's just this color again. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1 like so. And let's use this color for the diamond over there. So just like that, we have our diamond sword. Just make sure that you don't have any overlapping colors like so. And if you do, you can just select them with this tool. Select and drag, and then you can just move them. Enter. Sorry. Oops. Select and drag, enter, and then Control left click and move them. just so it is flat and we don't have like any extra voxels anywhere, and then you can just conform the box. And we have our Minecraft sword. So these are all the assets that we're gonna create today. If you want to create more, please feel free to create a pickaxe or whatever you want. But just for this tutorial, just not to make it too long, let's just stop here. So let's save this. And now we want to place the sword on the ground, make sure it's in the middle of the scene. And we're done.
I'm putting all of this content out for free, so all I ask you is to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also that you check out Synth Hunters, which is my voxel art upcoming game. Thank you. Let's keep going.
The last asset that we're gonna be creating will be the grass plane. So it's just for covering big areas without needing to make too many of those small cubes for the grass, the dirts of block and such. So let's hide the sword for now, and in layer number 8, we're gonna create a new box, Control N, make it 128 by 128 by 1. So then we have a big plane of 1 voxel tall. I'm gonna just fill it with the fill attach, and then I will just randomize it with the colors of my grass, and we are done. Let's just call this grass, and we're ready to start exporting all of our assets. So we're gonna unhide Steve, select everything, and we're gonna go to these 2 arrows, export selection only, export OBJ. Now we're gonna navigate to our folder, it's on the desktop, and exports number 2. Now we'll call this Magicavoxel all assets. And in here, I'll just call this file Steve. And then I will hide this and then unhide the zombie, select everything, OBJ, and export this as zombie. Then my dirt block, this is called dirt, but it should be called grass block, and let's export it. Then we have the stone block, and we have the grass blades. Maybe let's change the name to grass blades. Then we have the sword. We're doing this just so everything has different names. Otherwise everything would be called Steve, and that would be a bit annoying to import. And then we have the grass plane. So what will happen with this is that in our folder exports, we have now all assets, and if we sort by type, you see all the objects that we created. These OBJ files are the objects, the 3D objects. Then the MTL files basically explain the OBJ how to use the texture that is created, and then we have the actual textures. So if we open any of these textures, you will realize that they all look the same. It's basically this palette exported into a line. So what the program does is creating a polygon for each color and applying that color to each polygon. So now we have this, it's time to jump into Maya. So what I will do in Maya, it can be replicated in any 3D software. All 3D softwares have the same tools, they're just in different places and they work differently, but you can do the same in any of the softwares. So let's start importing our things in Maya. So let's go back to that folder, let's grab everything that is OBJ and let's bring it in. We don't need anything else in Maya. So once we have all of that, we are in Maya now. Let's click this button here to activate the colors so we can see them. And to navigate in Maya, it's very similar to Magicavoxel, but you have to press and hold Alt. So Alt and middle mouse button to drag, Alt and left mouse button to rotate the camera. And then with the right mouse button, you can zoom in and out. So what we will be doing now is in your outliner, if you don't see it, you go Window, Outliner. And we're gonna select all the things that are the same, so all the zombie parts. I'm gonna Control G, and that will create a group, and we're gonna call this group zombie, and then gonna hide it with the letter H. Then we're gonna grab all the Steve parts, Control G, and let's call this Steve. H to hide it. Then we have our grass plane, and all of these things really can be part of the scenario. Only the sword that I will want to have separate. So I will control click that to deselect it. Let's group this. Let's call this scenario. Let's hide it. And finally we have the sword. Let's just call it sword, and it can be loose without a group. So the part that is important right now is to create what is called a rigging for this object to be ready for posing. And in this case we're going to just create a static pose, not an animation, but the process is pretty much the same. So what we will do is select all of these, make sure you have selected all of the parts of the group, and you're going to go File, Export Selection, and we're going to export this as an FBX. It is important that you click where it says Embed Media. Make sure that this is enabled so the textures will come along in the creation of the file. So now that we have that ticked, let's go back to our folder, and let's now create a new export folder, version 003. Let's call this FBX Steve. Okay, so now that we have that, we can call this FBX Steve, export version 1, enter. Now we are ready to jump into Mixamo and start animating this character, which is super simple. So let's first open Mixamo, and you should see something like this. Right now I already have Steve here because I was practicing this tutorial before recording, but you will most likely see one of these characters. So what you will do is click where it says Upload Character, then select Character File, Export number 3, and just open your FBX. Now that you have this, just press Next, and now you have to start placing these objects. So the chin, make sure you don't put it right on the line, but a bit over. The wrists are not really important because we don't have wrists on our model. Then the elbows, somewhat in between. If you are not very sure, you can go back to your Maya file and check where that is. So you see it's like kind of like half through the arm. So the arm starts here, half is kind of there. And then the knees, again in the middle of the leg. Remember, the leg goes up there. And the groin, in our case, this character, if it was a more normal character, this part would be merged together, but the legs are two blocks that are separated. So just put it somewhere around there. Something very important is for you to change here where it says standard skeleton to no fingers, because in this case our character doesn't have any fingers, and this would otherwise create unnecessary bones. So now we are ready to just press next, and the magic starts happening. So right now it's going to be creating what is called bones, and these bones are basically controllers for our geometry. And once it's done, you should see your character moving. For whatever reason, it's not painting this part of the leg. I'm not sure why. And don't worry about it being all deformed like that. I know it looks weird, but we're gonna fix that in Maya, so don't worry. Let's press next, and this will bring our character here. So before you click anything, just download this pose, because we want this initial pose to then change it to the animation pose. So just download the T-pose binary, just click download. And let's go to our folder of exports and let's create a new one called version 4 Steve rigging. And in here we will want to just drag and drop or save there your animation. So let's call this Steve T-pose. Great, so now that we have our T-pose saved, we want a pose for our scene. So since we have the sword, I will probably just look for sword here and let's find something that gives us a cool pose. So let's try the first one here that we have, that is a single animation. And although it's animating, if you press pause here, you can just scrub through and see if you find a pose that could work. And I think this is a pretty cool pose, at least initial, and then we can modify it a bit. Again, I know it looks all weird, but we're gonna fix that in a minute. This is an automatic program, so that's why sometimes it can be a bit weird. So now that we have this pose, let's download it. Download. And let's put it in that folder that we have, and let's call this Steve sword pose. Great. The amazing thing is that because the zombie and Steve share the same shape of geometry and only change the colors, we can use this very same rigging for our zombie. So let's look for a zombie animation here, and let's select one that looks like it's walking, something like this. Okay, that's pretty cool. So let's change this to be in place, just so it doesn't move forward and it's always like staying in the same place. And let's click on download and let's download this. I generally just keep these settings here, and once we have that, let's pop that into the folder and call it zombie walk. It's not a bad name. Perfect. So we have all the rigging we need now to start preparing our scene in Maya. So let's go back to Maya and let's import that FBX that we just created. So let's go to our folder and let's change this to FBX, and let's bring Steve T-pose. That's the first one that we need to bring. So as you can see, this created bones that you cannot really see very well right now, but if you click this button that is called X-ray joints, you will see through the geometry whatever is bones. So basically, if you select any of these bones with click, you can press W, E or R to move them, and you see move these joints around. So the idea is to link these joints, these bones, to the geometry, so when we move this, it moves together. And the cool thing is that it's a whole system, so if you move this part, for instance, the head and the arms come together. So let's start doing that, but first let's save this file, save as, into my folder. Let's create a new folder for Maya files. In my case, you could be doing this in Blender or something else, and let's call this Minecraft scene. Okay, now let's start linking these bones to Steve. So let's select one of the bones, then shift, click on one of the geometry pieces that corresponds to that bone. So this part of the arm that goes with that bone. So you need to be in rigging mode here. So you generally are in modeling by default. So you change that to rigging. And then you click where it says skin, and in bind skin we want to click this little window. In there you want to use the bind to selected joints. What this will do is that it won't create any deformation. The joint will be parented to this geometry, and when you move, the whole geometry will come together. So when you press apply, now if I move, you see how it comes together without any deformation. So I want to do the same for all the parts. Select this part of the bone, to that geo, apply, and I will start doing that to the whole geometry. So select the head, the chest, let's use this part of the chest here and the whole torso. We're just trying to make it as simple as possible. That's why it's not perfect. So apply here, this bit, the leg, and the other leg. So we're gonna have extra bones that are useless for us in particular. Let's just leave it there, it's not a problem. So if you did everything correct, if you select the hips here, or just by clicking here, you should be able to move this and everything should come together. So let's Ctrl Z, and now let's save this file as version 2. I like to keep several versions just in case I want to go back or I did something wrong. You notice that the files are very small, 7 megabytes, so don't worry too much about it. And the great thing is that now that we've done that, if we go to Mixamo and we bring, for instance, Steve's sword pose and we just drag and drop it into the scene, Mixamo automatically will move those bones and it will create the animation that we had in Mixamo. Okay, in this case we don't want an animation, we just want a static pose. So what we will do is we're gonna go Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editor, and we're gonna select all of those bones, go back to your outliner, Shift, click on the plus to open every group, select all of the bones, and on the on the graph editor now, we're gonna press S just to create a keyframe on everything, and then we're gonna select everything here and delete. This way we're gonna have a frozen position that it will be more comfortable to work with for a static scene that we are creating. So right now it will be just a matter of moving these bones to fix the pose however you want. But don't worry too much about it right now, because I would rather have more objects into our scene before working a lot on this pose, because generally with the camera and everything you will realize that you will want to change things around. So okay, let's rename this to Steve Rigging, and let's file save scene, because we didn't change too much. What we are going to do next is to hide this and hide Steve and show the zombie. We're pressing H to hide and unhide stuff. So just to make it simpler, select everything and click File, Export Selection, and you can make a Maya binary file, and save it into the folder that we've been working on. So Maya, and let's call this zombie rigging. Okay, and now let's open that scene and let's create the rigging for the zombie separately, and then we're gonna import it back into this scene. So open that, let's save the changes in this one, and now let's bring again this Steve T-pose. Let's delete Steve from the outliner, and let's again do what we just did for that rigging. So we're gonna select this skin, bind skin, apply, and let's do this to all of the parts of the body. Once our zombie is fully rigged and we're sure we didn't forget any of the parts, we're gonna save it, zombie rigging, and we're gonna import the zombie walk that we downloaded. Once you just drag and drop it, it will create the animation. So we can delete this Steve geometry that comes with the FBX. And what we want to do is select a pose that doesn't look too bad. Maybe something like that. One foot is going forward, the other one is backwards. And we're gonna delete the animation just to keep this frame. So we are in frame 11 here in the timeline. You can just click and drag to change the frame. We're gonna go to Windows, Animator, Graph Editors, go back to your outliner and shift click to open this collapsed group. Select everything, and in the graph editor, without moving frames, just press S. This will create a frame in every one of the channels. So then select all of this animation and delete it. So basically now we have this frozen frame and no animation, and this will be more comfortable for us to work with. So let's fix a bit this position by rotating the parts just to make it look a bit nicer for our model. So let's move the arms, let's get the head rotated a bit forward, and overall that's not too bad. So let's save it like this right now, and let's then change it once we have our camera set up. So let's file save and zombie rigging, let's underscore post, and we have this separate version. So let's go back now to our main Minecraft scene. So let's go back to our main Minecraft scene where we have Steve. We can just delete this zombie for now because we now have a separate one. So select that group and press delete. And let's rename this rigging to Steve rigging. I would love to group these things together, but then if you do that, you start getting errors when you move it. So just keep it separated and rename it properly. So the next thing we will want to make is a first draft of the scenario. So before we import the zombie and everything, so let's unhide the scenario. And now let's scale it down. So let's unhide Steve just for reference. Select your scenario, and pressing R, we go to our scaling tool, and the yellow one is that scales everything uniformly. So let's start dragging there to the left, and I think somewhere around here is a good size for our scenario. Perfect. So now let's hide Steve and let's start creating some scenario here. So let's hide everything and let's unhide just the grass plane. So in order to everything stay on the grid and not having to worry too much about how things snap together, let's press the letter D and then zoom into one of the corners and click the last point in there. So you see how it highlights this red dot. So just click it and your pivot will move there, and now your geometry will move and rotate from that point. The good thing about that is that if I now press Ctrl D to duplicate this geometry, I can hold V and click and drag, and I can snap. You see how it goes all the way until the last point and snaps there. So I can just do that again to have 3 of these guys, and then select them all together. Maybe let's group them together. Let's call this grass planes. Now select the 3 of them, duplicate them, Ctrl D, and let's again change the pivot, this time to the front. So if D is pressed, you should be able to see the word align down there. So just click the last point here, then W to go back to your move mode, and with V pressed, just move all the way back. So now we have a good scenario here to work with. You see Steve is right here. So let's move all of the grass planes just so Steve is somewhat, just make sure that not to move in the wrong axis, right? So just move in horizontally. So Steve is somewhat in the middle of that. Perfect. Now let's start working with the blocks. So if I bring my grass block, which is this one grass block, this is the third block, wrongly named. Then we have the grass blades, that's fine. Then we have the stone block, which actually is also wrongly named. Let's call this grass block. Probably did something wrong when I was exporting. And then we have here the stone block. So let's call this one stone block. So now that we have our grass block, let's move it back. You can Control Shift, right click, object, just so your axis is properly connected. And right now is a good time to create a camera because we don't want to work extra. We want to work just for the camera because we're creating a single image. So just to make it as easy as it can be. So let's create cameras, camera. And the difference with this is that we can just go inside of this camera, move it, and we have options such as in the attribute editor. If you don't see it, Windows, General Editor, Attribute Editor. And we can change here the focal length to 150. This way we're gonna have less perspective deformation and it will look more like an orthographic render from Magicavoxel. So now let's place the camera somehow close to the ground plane. And let's put Steve in the middle of it. So for helping on that, we can just click here where it says resolution gate. This will show us our 16:9 resolution. And we can also click this button here that says field chart. So with this activated, we can see the center of the screen. So let's place Steve in the center. Let's bring the camera a bit back to have space for the rest of the elements. And maybe now we can bring our grass planes a bit forward. Just for ease of movement, I will just press spacebar. And I will just drag down these two on the line there. So we have only two windows. And let's change this one to be perspective. And this one will be your camera. So just to be sure, you can go perspective, camera 1. And now that is here, I will just temporarily lock it because I don't want to accidentally move it because I will be moving this one here. So I will just move all of this grass forward just so it reaches the end of the frame. And then I will perhaps create 3 more grass blocks behind it just to cover a bit more ground. So Control D, hold V and move it back. Great, so now let's start placing our dirt blocks. If you want to see your texture here, just make sure to click this one that says textured. Great, so then let's go all the way back to the last bit here. And if we move this up a bit, we can press D and just make sure we are placing the pivot in the last bit there. And let's press W to go back to moving mode, and let's snap this to the grid. So let's create a bunch of these cubes. So let's press Control D and then V, click and drag. And now that you've done that, you can just press Shift D, and in theory Maya should just repeat the last action. So you see how I can just make several of them. So let's make a row of them. And now that we've done that, we can just maybe select all of them and move them a little bit. Maybe let's make them snap right on the edge over there. And now let's make this a bit more complex so it looks a bit nicer. So let's Control D, move this forward. Maybe these two can also have one more forward. And right now what I'm seeing is that our camera is so frontal that we barely see any depth. So let's unlock the camera for a moment. Let's go back so we see all of it. And let's move it a little bit like so. This way we're gonna have a bit more depth on our render. So let's put it back here. And maybe let's move Steve right now, just so it goes back to this position. So he's there. Perfect. So you see how it is important to keep this somewhat big, just so you don't miss any of this frame. So let's turn this off for now, and let's turn the rigging off again. We're gonna change the position of Steve in a moment. But let's hide the the attribute editor, so we have some more real estate. And let's keep pasting these guys. So duplicate, Control D, and then V to move. And maybe one more. And here, let's just make one more, but in this case, we're gonna need to change the side of these pivots. So press D, align to the last point, and then with V, just move it, snap it there. Great. So now we've done that, we could very well create a second row of these guys. So let's Control D, and with V, let's move it back. And you see, we don't see much further back, so we don't need to go crazy on this. If you want to see some more of that, you can just move your camera a bit higher up. Great. So now that we have that, let's just add some more that are a bit higher. Something like that. Just make sure to duplicate the ones that you need so it doesn't really look empty. And then we can use some of these grass planes too. So let's duplicate one of these guys. And let's change the position to that. And let's snap it there. You see that very quickly we start creating this very big scenario. So let's do that again. Let's change it there and snap. And to cover a bit this area, let's just duplicate some of these. Control D. Let's move these guys like over here, and we can maybe just grab a bunch of those. Maybe these three, duplicate them up. Right, maybe one more here. Just to add some complexity to your scene. Same goes here. Maybe just duplicate one of these guys. Let's use our other blocks as well. The dirt block could come here, so let's change the pivot and place them. And why not some stone? Okay, now that we have a scenario, let's add some grass blades. And the reason I like to use these grass blades is just because they help me break a bit the harsh lines of the scene. So you see, if I just come here with them and place them, I don't know, around here, it starts like adding some complexity to your scene that is very nice to have. So let's place some of those. Perfect. Now that this is in place, we are ready to start working on our zombies. So just for now, let's save this scene, file, save as. Let's call this 02. Perfect. So let's hide this for a moment and let's bring our zombies. So file, import, navigate to your folder, and it is zombie rigging post. Now the zombie is there, so you can select the hips and position it. So let's put one of them here in the camera and make sure that it's not penetrating the ground. So lift it up a bit and turn it around. And we have our first zombie there. So I would like the zombies to be a bit more intimidating. So for that, I will just move my camera a bit. So I will, before I do that, I will just save. And I will just move the camera slightly like that. Just so the zombie looks a bit bigger and a bit more intimidating. I think something like that could work. Great, so let's bring him a bit closer to camera. And now I want to bring another one, so import zombie rig post. And just to keep it consistent, let's call this zombie 01 and zombie 01 rig. And this other one, zombie 02, zombie 02 rig. So let's bring zombie 2 over here. Again, make sure it's not penetrating the ground. Let's turn it around. And let's bring it closer to camera. Maybe this one can be a bit further away. So the good thing about bringing them like this is that I can just edit the rigging if I need to. So I can just, for instance, make these legs a bit straight. Make it so it's a bit more standing up. So I will just push him a bit up. Head goes down. Arm moves a bit like so. So it's just some patience. You see that nothing that we're doing here is complicated. It's just a lot of steps, but it's not hard, right? So there you have it. So you have two zombies there. So let's work a bit on the pose of Steve because I don't really like it so much. So let's make him stand up a bit more upright. Maybe his legs come forward a bit. Let's see it in perspective. So let's see the bones in here. You can Control Shift left click object just to move things properly as it's intended. And I would like this arm to move a bit forward like so. And now I want to see my sword, so let's bring it and let's change the pivot with D to align it with that, just so it is easier to link to the geometry here. So let's place it on its hand. Again, object. And now that it's there, what I want to do is to move it inside of the bone. So you see this sphere here? If you press F in the outliner, you should find it, right hand. And I want to grab the sword and middle mouse button drag inside of the right hand. And this way, when I move this bone now, it just comes together. So I want a pose for this arm where I really see the sword and it's not hidden by the body. So it could be something like that. And he's ready for fighting. Maybe this leg comes like that, so it's like running forward. Oops. Maybe the whole body is a bit more like so, and he's in a more dynamic pose. Maybe kind of flying. So that's the fun thing. We can do anything we want with this now. Great. Let's hide. Let's bring a third zombie, and let's place this guy somewhere over here. And let's make sure that we can see all of the parts. So I like to move the parts of the body so we really see that arm. So we can see this one as well. The head, something like so. Maybe this can go a bit like so. And let's move this leg back so it's more like it is walking. And the last and fourth, let's change the name first to this one, zombie 03. Great. And let's save. And file import. Oops. A fourth one. Here we have it. Let's place it somewhere around here. Great. Just some positioning, just so we see. I always try to see two of the faces of the geometry. So if instead of having it like this, you see how it looks pretty bidimensional. I just move it a bit so we see two of the faces, right? Same for this leg. Maybe it will look better if it was like that. And let's put it up so it's not inside of the ground. And there we have it. So now we have our scene. The next thing I will do is File, Save, and I will save as a second version. Number 3 will be our lighting. So let's hide the joints for now. So just go Show Joints, and we have our scene without any joints. And you see that already our scene looks pretty cool. We are just missing one leg from Steve, and I don't know if that is because of the joints or because the position is not the best. Yeah. Let's put it a bit down. And let's hide again. Great. So now that we have this, it's time for creating our lighting. So let's lock the camera again. And the first step for the lighting, it is to go to Arnold and create an HDRI map. This will create, if I go to my perspective again, a big dome of light that will illuminate our scene from all angles. So select this dome of light in the outliner here, go to the attribute editor, and in the color, just apply an HDR material. If you don't have any, just visit the link in my description, Polyhaven, just download an AXR file that you like. In this case, I'm using one called Photo Studio Loft 4K, and I'll put that on my render. So now that we've done that, if I go and press this button here, a render would kick in. So it's doing it, and you see that it doesn't really look great, but we're gonna change that very quickly. So first thing is select your sky dome, and here where it says camera, press 0, and now the background will be transparent, and we're gonna use that in Photoshop. And the next thing we need is a material, and I've designed this so the material is super easy. So we're gonna use just one material, and for that you're gonna go to your hyper shade, clicking this ball here, and you see right now there's a lot of things going on, but don't worry, all you need to do is just press tab and create an AI standard surface material. Let's call this general shader. And what you want in here is to grab the color that you have here, and basically, because everything comes from the same Magicavoxel scene and the same colors, we just need one texture for everything. So what you will want to do is here go to textures, and you see you have the same texture over and over and over again. So just drag and drop with left mouse button, sorry. So what you will do is just click on any of those, just click on Shift and click on your shader, and then click this button here. This button here, Input Connections. This will just show both things here. So what you want to do is grab this texture and connect the color to the base color, connect it also to the subsurface color, and also to the subsurface radius. Once you've done that, click on your surface here, and in your attribute editor, you probably will have it here, but I just don't like it in this window, so I remove it. So it's the same. You will see this window in your hypershade. You will change the specular to 0.2, the roughness to 0.5, the subsurface to 1, and the scale of the subsurface to 0.05. I know these are a bit of a magic numbers, but this works. This kind of works for me in general. So I always basically do the same material for my work. So the next thing I will just save, just in case everything crashes, and I will go to my outliner, gonna select all of the geometry. Yeah, you see I selected everything. Let's also select the sword, and let's go to our hypershade and let's assign material to viewport selection. And now the material changed. So let's rename this material to general shader. And now to improve this a bit, we can start rotating a bit this light. So if you go to your channel box, layer editor, you can just start rotating this in Y. So let's put, I don't know, 50, 80, 90. Just keep rotating it until you find something that you like, basically. And you see that already is looking pretty cool, but I generally like to use this as a small part of my lighting and just add some extra by hand. So let's do that now. Let's pop this thing in here and let's change this to perspective. Perfect. So I will hide this and you see that everything becomes black. I will create in the Arnold tab and a light. You see it's like this square here. And I will just orient this light around. You see that if I move it, you start seeing how it affects my scene here. So let's put it around here and rotate it a bit so it points to Steve. And let's, in the attribute editor, change the light so it has some more exposure. Something around 8. This way we're going to start creating more specific lighting that works better for our scene. So let's put this guy here, and I like to change the roundness so it's not so harsh on the edges and the soft edges. Also, if you want, so it doesn't affect so much everything, you can just change a bit the spread so it will be a more focused light. So you see how it becomes much brighter. So you have to play it a bit with the exposure just to make sure that it works perfect for you. So I will just point it a bit up just so it doesn't have so much influence on the ground, because I just want to get a more dramatic lighting for Steve. So let's make this light so it hits the front and the sword. You see how it's giving us something pretty cool already. Let's get a bit of that arm. And you see how it's very localized on Steve, so we can make a very specific lighting with this. And let's change it maybe to something like 6, 6.5, and let's give it a bit of an orange tint perhaps, just to make it more cinematic. Perfect. So let's save that. And if you see that your light is not updating the color, sometimes you need to close this Arnold view and just open a new one. And if it's not on your camera, you see that it moved, is because this perspective shape needs to be on camera. So let's make sure that this light is orange. Let's restart it. Sometimes it will be like that it won't just update your color for some reason. It's a bit buggy. Yeah, that is very annoying. Sometimes Maya does that. Just close it and open it and it will start working again. But anyway, we have this light now. Let's pop it back in. And what I want to do is to duplicate this light, Control D, and let's move it to the other side. And let's get Steve lit on this side too. Maybe a bit lower down so we catch some more of the trousers. And of course this light needs to be dimmer. It's just so it's not so dark. And let's give it like a blue tint. And again, if this is not updating, like in my case, just close it, open it again, camera, and you see that we already are having like this very cinematic coloring. If you feel that this is too much, which I'm feeling right now, just go back to your hypershade, and in your general shader, I don't know, it didn't change the name for some reason. Oh, there is something else called general shader. So let's edit, delete and unused node, and it will get rid of everything that is not using right now. So now probably we can just go general shader, and no, it doesn't work, so okay. General SHD. Okay, Maya is being Maya right now, so don't worry about it. But what I want you to do in this shader that we have applied to everything is to change it a bit lower down, maybe 2.5, just so it's not so soapy. And great, now that this is working, I want to start duplicating these lights and applying them to the zombies. So I'll just make it a bit lower so it catches a bit more of those legs. And let's now save and start duplicating these lights. Let's start with the red lights. Duplicate this one and move it behind this zombie here, and try to find something that works for him. Yeah, maybe a bit less intense. It's affecting a bit this one, but it's not a big deal. Then let's move this one so it affects this guy. Maybe a bit more so it touches the back. And we see those legs. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. And then let's duplicate it so we see this guy in the back. And one more for the other one. Something to bear in mind is that you see this shadow here. The smaller this light is, the sharper this shadow will look, and the bigger you make it, the more diffuse this shadow will look. So have that in mind when you're working. Okay, let's now duplicate these blue lights. So one goes for this guy, just a little bit. Now this side of this guy maybe a bit less intense. And let's duplicate again for this guy up here. It really needs a side light because the shadows are very dark on him. So we get that green popping with this blue light. And finally this other guy, and we have some lighting specific for each one of our characters. Now that this is done, let's bring back our environment light. And let's make it on the exposure, let's make it -2, -3, just so it's not too present. And let's also rotate it until we find something that looks cool for this shot, especially on the scenario bit. I just want some lighting in front of these things, so let's make it maybe -2. And this is how our render is looking at the moment. Something else I would like to do to make this look a little bit better is, let's save it. And what I want to do is go to your camera 1, and you're gonna go display, heads up display, object details, and this will show you these details here. So whenever you click on something, you will know the distance from the camera. In this case is 46. So we're gonna click on our camera here to select it. You go down, Arnold, and enable depth of field, DOF, and write the number 46. And now when you render, if you change here the aperture, so if I put 1, and this updates, then you will see that the zombies become defocused. So all the focus is on that number that we typed. So just to make it better, we're gonna start playing with this number until we find something that works for us. So probably something like 0.1. So we have some depth of field on the zombies, but our character is in focus. So that will give it a bit more of a cinematic look. You can play with this and remove some more if you want, maybe 0.8, so it's not so defocused. And we are almost ready. So the last part we're going to do in Maya, let's save again, is to change a bit of the settings so the render is not so noisy. So I'm going to give you some magic numbers here. You can copy them and you can study better what they mean if you want, but put something like 5 in here. We are using subsurface scattering, so put 3 there. We want some on the specular and some on the diffuse. The more you put here, the slower your render will be, but the less noise you will have. So let's go with something like 6, just to make sure that we don't have any noise. And the next thing I want you to do is to get this normals path. So you just click the end there in AOVs, pop it in, and change the filter to Gaussian. Great, let's save that. And I will also, in the Arnold window here, so this thing here, I will add 3 things. The first one, let's maximize this, and click in this wheel. And in the imagers here, I want exposure, and this allows us to make the scene brighter overall. Maybe a bit less. Then I want to add lens effects and put something like 0.1 here, and this will make that the very bright bits of your scene will glow. So now that we have those 2 things, the last thing I want to add is a denoiser. So even if it has some noise, it will be removed by the denoiser. So make sure that before you do all of this and you send your render, that you're happy with everything here. Just make sure that nothing is too bright. Maybe this was a bit too much. So maybe I will just, for my case, not have the exposure, but you know that it exists and maybe it's good for your scene. And let me add the denoiser now. And with that done, now it's a matter of waiting for this thing to finish. So try not to touch anything because this is a live render, so if you start clicking around, it might just start over. But something I want to bring your attention to is that in here in Beauty, if you press N, you will see the normal path that I will teach you how to use in a minute when we are in Photoshop. So let's just wait for this to render now. Perfect. Now that our render is done, what I want you to do is to go File, Save Image, navigate to your folder, and maybe create a new one called Renders, version 1, and call this beauty.png. This is not the best format for you to save your renders, but just to make things as simple as possible, save as PNG for now. Change to N and save again. Go back to your folder and call it N. And now let's jump into Photoshop. Great, so let's drag and drop our renders. First one, and now the second one on top of it. Just drag and drop it and press enter, and let's hide it for now. So here we have our image. So the first thing I want to do here is to add a background here, so it is transparent by now, so that's why we don't see that black color we've seen before. So what I will do is simply go and search for Minecraft, night, sky, and find an image that works for this. I mean, you could very well go inside of Minecraft and get an image yourself, but thank you resourcepack.net. I will just use this image for the sake of this tutorial. You guys go into Minecraft and just get the sky that you need. So I'll just make a print screen of that and Control V inside of our render. So right now this is much bigger than our render, so let's Control T and make it a bit smaller. And now let's position it so it works for our render. So you see how much better it looks now that we have the actual Minecraft render there, and it didn't took any time for us to make it. So perfect. Now that we have this, we can start creating some adjustments for this image. So first of all, I'm gonna call this background, and I want you to click here where it's a ball with half and half, and create curves. This will create non-destructive curves, so you can change this and you can turn this layer on and off. So I will just make the dark bits a bit lighter overall, and not so much the light bits, so just so our scene doesn't explode. So that just makes everything a bit brighter. And then what I want to do is go to the blue here where it says RGB, go to blue, grab the bottom end and just bring it up a bit, just so everything gets a bit of a bluish tint. Perhaps we want to make this a bit darker, so let's create curves for that background and make it just slightly darker. One more thing I want to do is to add a depth of field for this background, because otherwise that wouldn't make sense. So let's go filter, blur, lens blur, and make it not so big, something like 10 probably. And now it makes more sense with the rest of our image. So maybe I will just make it a bit bigger and move it a bit higher up, something like that. Yeah, great. So I will show you now how I use this normal mask. So basically this is 3 masks in one. So what we want from here is, if you go in and click it and you change to your channels, you will see that you have red, blue and green, and each one of those is a black and white mask. That's how our RGB colors are generated on your screen. So what you can do with this is Control A when you are in one of the channels, this case the green, and Control C, and just copy this image. So if you go back to your RGB, you can hide this now, and you can create curves, and this we can rename curves green. And then if you alt click in this white block, you are inside of the mask of these curves. So if you Control V, you just made it so the black pixels will not be affected, and the whiter the pixel is, the more it will be affected by the curves. So if we Alt click again, we can now start changing, and you see that it only changes where the mask is white. So it only changes these upper faces. So that way we can start maybe improving a bit some of the parts of the render. So you see this helps us to read much better all of these bits here, and we could potentially do that with other bits. So if we wanted, we can just now do the same for this side. So let's copy this and let's create another set of curves, and this will be the curves red. Go Alt click, Control V, and now let's see if this gives us anything that we can use. It's not too bad. We could even just change, for instance, the red value here, so it makes it a bit more reddish, so it's more obvious the difference between the blue and the other light. So I think this is pretty good. Okay, so maybe these curves could be a bit darker. Perfect. So now we have this image going on, which is not bad, but it could be improved. So one thing that I want to do, that I always do, that I love to do, is to look for sparks overlay. Find an image with a lot of sparks. Let's, just for the sake of this tutorial, use this one, but try to find one that is royalty free. I'm gonna just make a screenshot of this, and I'm going to paste it on top of everything, and then just make it a bit bigger so it covers your whole scenario. And again, go filter, blur, lens blur. This time you can go a bit bigger, maybe 25, and change the blending mode here where it says normal to screen, and this way you can create this cool bokeh effect. So I know this is very exaggerated at the moment, but you could very well click here to make a mask, and then when you click on this white thing, you can go to your brush, and with the black brush you can start deleting if your opacity is at 100 where you don't want them. So let's make it very subtle. If you want to bring them back, just change to white and just paint some back. Perfect. If you don't want them to be so red, what you can do is just create a hue saturation here in the editors here. Hue saturation, and one thing is, of course, if you change it now, it changes everything, but if you alt click in the middle of the two lines, you will only change the layer underneath. So we can just make them a bit more purple or something that works a bit better with our scene. Great. So this is pretty much it. You don't need much more, but if you want to go one step ahead, just select everything, Ctrl J, Ctrl E. Now you have like a duplicate of your image. I just noticed that my background is not fully covering, so let me just move it a bit back, down, and let's do that again. Ctrl J, Ctrl A, Ctrl E, sorry, and hide all of these. And now I have one image with everything. So I will go filters, with this image selected, filter, camera raw filter. And in here you have some more options to take advantage of the technology of Photoshop. It will show you like your whole images, but don't worry, in the end it will just crop it back to what it should be. So what I will do here is maybe add some sharpen, and I will reduce some of the noise, maybe just 50-50, and let's sharpen the details a bit. Okay, maybe not too much. Yeah, play with it just to remove some more of that noise. And now in optics, I want some vignette. If this is bothering you too much, what you could do is just press C and then enter, and this will crop your image so it's only that. So let's go back now to our filters and let's redo it. JE, I don't know, let's make a group with all of these and call it base. And let's go ahead, filter, camera raw filter, and let's go again with detail, bit of sharpening, remove some of the noise, optics, let's create some vignette, and some lens distortion is never bad, makes it more cinematic. Then you can add some calibration or color grading, sometimes it's cool, just to make it maybe a bit bluer, or just tint a bit those purple highlights. Maybe the highlights could be more orangey and the shadows more bluey. Just play with it and find something that you like, and that's pretty much it. If I press OK now, we can see the difference of the two images. It's not bad. So this is our final result. So you can see that even me explaining every part of it, it took under an hour. So it shouldn't be too hard for you to get this up to speed, and you can create images like this in under 2-3 hours if you practice a bit. So I hope this helped you, and see you in the next tutorial.